Yes, these are our guest speakers. These are incredible women. They'll be discussing more about closing the gender gap in South Africa and all over the world, actually. And it's a very important month in South Africa, as in, I want to say, 1956, we had the march of 2,000 women against the past laws. And yeah, just giving women the freedom to roam and vote and yeah, being strong and empowered. So really thank you both, Debbie and Lisel, for joining us. It's really a special day that you guys are here. So thank you so much. Over to you.
All righty. Thanks, Debs. Lisel, Debbie, either one, if you can take the screen or...
Yes, I think Debbie will kick off because she's only here for a short, like 40 minutes or now 30 minutes. So let Debbie kick off and then I'll take over after that. Cool.
Happy with that. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, well, I have a good 40 minutes, so let's see how it goes. Thank you so much. So when it comes to diversity and inclusion, my experience throughout my career in South Africa has always been amazing. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, we need to talk about it on a board level, on a C-suite level, the strategy tables and all the levels of the organization, the teams and the solutions. So during my career in South Africa, our teams and our managers and even the executives were always equitable, diverse set of people. And it was from when I started my career in COBOL and Natural Adabas as a programmer on the IBM mainframe in the early 90s in Nylstroom, through to leaving IBM South Africa as an executive information architect in 2017 to work for IBM in United Arab Emirates. And at IBM, I was very fortunate to become involved in all kinds of emerging technologies, especially artificial intelligence initiatives. And it is where I really realized that it's not only the people in the organization that has to be diverse, it's also the technology and the data that crucially has to have these diverse perspectives. So, Lisel, if you don't mind, give us a bit of about yourself, your passion, why you're here, and what you would like to talk about.
Awesome. So some of the people on the forum know me exceptionally well because data in South Africa is a small world. As I've been fortunate to be in a data space since the 1990s. I worked at Nissan Manufacturing, and quite interesting, surrounded by men. And I've never been really focused on I'm the only woman in the room, or I'm the only girl doing data engineering or coding. So it just naturally happened, and I think it's quite fortunate for me that it was never a challenge. If it was, because I grew up with brothers and I had a very proactive dad that supported everything that I did. But it became quite evident for me around about the 2000s when I joined ebooks.com that there is just not women in the coding space. They normally did business analysis, or they will do business process mapping, that type of stuff. And there I then started to consider, how do I get more women into this space? There was a lot of women in data governance, in data quality, but data science, machine learning, AI, those type of concepts was mainly men. And that's where my first journey then started. I started little roundtable conversations just in eBooks to get more women interested in the tech side of data, and not just the management side of data. Yeah, and that's how I found women in AI a few years later, because as I moved up in the ranks of an organization, you start getting targets that you have to meet the EE targets and the gender targets. And I could just not source women to get and to take the positions that we had available. So that was the next challenge. So then started working with the universities, especially UJ. They're very proactive in that front. And Stellenbosch, we started working with them to see how we can source more women. So my passion is just to get women interested in this exciting world where it's never boring. For me, the other stuff, I get bored very quickly. But data engineering is never a boring moment. There's always a bug or incident or something that bad data quality caused or stuff like that. So it keeps you going, keeps you reading articles a lot, so you can never stagnate. Yeah, so that's why I joined Women in AI, to get more diverse interest in the topics around data engineering, which includes, in my personal opinion, machine learning, data science, and the whole productionalization of models into a system or business process for that. Cool, and I spoke too much, Debbie. So Debbie, if I just reflect back on that, I was wondering if you could just give us some view of where do we stand currently with AI and diversity?
Yeah, I really think we live in this incredible inflection point in history because of unprecedented advancement in technology and the explosion of data and our ability to consume and convert it into intelligence. We are at the start of, in IBM, we called it the seismic technological shift that occurs only once in 25 years, and it will be driven by emerging technologies, especially artificial intelligence. And today, more than ever, it's important for organizations to incorporate diversity to be successful. And we know that organizations with equitable female representations in the C-suite and on board level reports 10% better economic performance. And with equitable, I mean, you know, equal men and women, not more women than men or more men than women. So organizations will be incumbent disruptors with the rich historical data that they have, especially about their customers. And these organizations create this vision of how they will unlock the value of data and AI in the future. And authors like Randy Bean and Thomas Davenport wrote books about, you know, how, and many articles about practical strategies as examples of, you know, AI bringing great economic benefits to organizations. And another author that's really close to my heart is Bill Schmartlow. He writes about AI strategies, but he also writes about how to include very practically diversity and inclusion into everything that you do. So just to give you an example of what Randy Bean wrote to in, I think it was one of his articles where in healthcare, he said the benefits in oncology is really clear, but even administratively, AI can help greatly improve supply chains and scheduling of hospital staff, like doctor overtime can be reduced with 10%, and facility utilization can be increased with 15%. So there's many lisel of really great work that's being done with artificial intelligence. Lisel, from your side, what do you think is the current state of artificial intelligence and diversity?
Cool, Debbie, I'll get to that. I see Howard's hand is up while I'm answering Estie's question, then I'll get to that quickly.
Right, so we've actually got a question from Estie. Estie, it seems like I got half the statement. So you said would this be companies that are public facing that have been made these figures available, and it's different in different countries? I'm not sure the whole context.
Yeah, so we have, as women in AI, we like gatherers, you know, men are from Mars, they are the hunters, we are the gatherers. And we have gathered so many research studies already, and I'm very happy to share with you all the results, and it's global, it's really global organizations. Randy Bean and Thomas is there in the US. So a lot of their research and examples are US, but they do include the whole world in their benchmarking. And we do also know about a lot about South Africa as a in terms of research. For example, South Africa has on a student level, on the university level, South Africa is one of the few countries that has an equitable female representation in the STEM field. So that's also a bit of good news.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Debbie.
And I've got
Yes,
one more question, and that's for all the males on this call. I know, and I've spoken to a few that are battling with equality, and maybe just to give you a description, and I like that term inclusion, but you haven't really spoken about it. I liked Christine gave us an explanation of inclusion, and I'm not sure if you're facing that or having to deal with those issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to take that one, Lisel?
So Debbie, yeah, Howard, I tend to struggle a little bit with, but so I don't want to exclude anyone per se. However, the crisis we currently have is the female misrepresentation.
Yeah.
And then there is also a lack of race representation.
Agreed.
So we do have, as a global concern, these challenges we have to face, but we have to be very careful that we don't focus so hard on the minority groups that the current group is becoming the minority in future. So I really, even though we call it women in AI or women in big data, we don't exclude anyone. So males attend our forums, males can sit on the board and give advice. And I really need a lot of support from males. Males has always been my mentors throughout my life. So I really don't want to exclude one gender at the risk of another one. But it is a big challenge. We get that question. I get that question quite a lot in South Africa. And I can understand the fear and the angst, or angst, what is the Afrikaans for angst, that comes with that. Yeah, but we will have to be very careful that we don't create another minority by just focusing on the current minority groups, because we are going to have challenges, especially now I'm going to divert a little bit, especially with the data science models and AI models. With LGBTQ, with all those type, if we don't have sample data of those type of minority groups, we are going to sit with a global challenge.
Yeah.
And I think if I can go back then to the question Debbie asked around the state of AI and diversity. So there's currently a crisis in the AI sector across gender and race, because the version over digital technologies and the inclusive development is just skyrocketing at the moment. And the biggest challenge around that is because we do not have representative data sets. So the data sets we always have was because of an inclusive gender or race at that time and of history. Males used to be very inclusive if you look at the history. And that's the data we have. But on the other hand, it can be consciously used towards mitigating inequities. I can never say that word.
Inequality.
Empowerment. Thank you. And inclusion. So we have to use the things for the better, but there's always a bad and a good to anything that you look at. And the current challenges we have with AI is that the programming and the technology itself, if you look at what the World Economic Forum released, is that 78% of global professionals with AI skills are male, where 15% of AI researchers that working at Facebook is female. 10% of researchers working at Google is female. Only 2.5% at Google is female. And if you look at all these big corporates, they are the people that come up with all these next best things. And AI is not a sentient being, so it's a human-made product. It's built on data. It's meant to make our human tasks easier. But we are inherently biased just by being humans. Someone can just look at you and say good morning and you're cheesed off by that person, but you don't know why. And they were friendly and everything. So as a result, the data sets that feed into the AI system might also be biased, because AI works on that same principle of garbage in and garbage out. So if you feed biased data into an algorithm, it will spit out biased decision. And that's the current crisis that we are in, that inaccuracies resulting from, I heard a nice word, which is called data blur or data blindness. As you aggregate the data, the detail and the sensitive issues then falls away. And that's then when bias comes in. Because I don't think humans are inherently biased by making a decision, I'm going to write now this model to exclude all females in an application form. I think it just comes from the training data that you have. It comes from the way data has been consolidated. So I think that is the challenge that we're struggling with now, that we have with the state of AI and of diversity. It's just the core of it is we do not have representative data, and we don't have teams that are representative. So So maybe Debbie can tell us where we have gone wrong with AI and diversity into the previous conversation.
Yeah, just a bit of the challenges that we are facing, but I don't think it's all doom and gloom. There's a lot that, for example, women in AI are doing to which I'll touch on later, to really help alleviate some of these challenges. But I do think that AI is the one profession that can either tremendously benefit society if we do diversity and inclusion right, or hurt society if diversity and inclusion is not baked into everything that the organization does. Last year, in World Economic Forum had an article that said bias in AI is a real concern and it's generating more attention. And Gartner predicted that in 2022, 85% of AI projects will deliver erroneous outcomes, owing it to bias in data, bias in algorithms, or the teams that are responsible for managing it. And if I can give you an example, large insurers, or say health insurers, can save billions of dollars applying AI in fraud, wastage, and abuse. In healthcare payments, and I can testify to that. I worked at Discovery Health as their BI architect, and using machine learning AI, really great sums of money was saved to identify fraudulent claims. And in patient care, extensive validation and testing has to be done to ensure responsible AI. And responsible AI means that the algorithms are human-centric. And the famous Andrew Ng, the founder of Coursera, he started this data-centric AI movement to address, amongst other things, the bias that's prevalent in AI in all the industries. There's also a lot of examples of bias. The one book that I really like is AI Thought Book. It listed over 200 cognitive biases. It's very interesting to read. And if you look at patient treatment in healthcare, where you maybe treat a Black person with a treatment that was only tested with data of white people. Recruiting young males in a team, developing AI algorithms for recruitment using data, only the data that's skewed towards the information that they have at hand. I always say there are those who know not that they know not. You know, you just don't know. So why is it so biased? It's because, like Lisel said, only 26% of the field, data analytics and AI, are women. So we're not encouraging enough women to enter the field. And then only 10% of worldwide, okay, this is worldwide figures that I'm giving you now. Only 10% of publications in this field is by women. So women are not likely to take up roles that are driving innovation and change. They assume more supportive type of roles. And 50% of women leave this field mid-career. And to me, that's a bit of a scary figure. And I'll tell you a bit of research around maybe why this is. Research has shown that many women see the corporate ladder as a difficult obstacle, while men see it as a welcome challenge, right? So most men thrive on convincing others that they are ready to be promoted, while most women prefer that their work speaks for itself, right? So there's also this phenomenon that, this is true, women in their 50s are more likely to develop imposter syndrome, feeling that they really just don't belong. And especially because the higher up they go on the corporate ladder, the less females they encounter. So another set of, and I'm very happy to share all the research with you, but women list less skills on their profiles than men. And then women will only apply for a position if they are confident that they are experts in 85% of the skills that are listed, where men will apply for the same position if they feel they know enough about 40% of the skills that are listed. So there's also another set of research about performance appraisal history in large corporates, where women are consistently rated less, with a less promotion potential than their male counterparts. And that's even if their current performance is higher than their male counterparts. So these are just really true facts based on research, and I'll share the links. So back to you for any challenges that you see, Lisel, or questions, or.
I think if we look at the questions quickly, Debbie, wait, how would we create or generate or encourage people to contribute to diverse and inclusive data sets? Do you have any opinion on that? That's from Esty.
Yeah, so for me, it's about doing the diversity and inclusion thing on all levels of the organization, starting with the C-suite and the board, and then going down to the strategy tables of the entire organization through all the business units. And then, so to me, it's a top-down approach. You get the buy-in from the top to the strategy tables, and then you have the diverse teams, inclusive, not more women than men, because then a whole lot of other sets of bias will creep in. Make sure that that's why I like the word equitable. It should be equally diverse and inclusive.
So then,
If you
Deborah,
have the team and the buy-in from the top, and you have the team, then naturally you'll have all the various dimensions to look at when you build the data sets and the solutions.
So do you think that then links into an item on how do we improve diversity with artificial intelligence? So how do we solve for that problem then?
Yeah, so I think we encourage women to enter the field, and I think South Africa is doing a pretty good job at that with the universities that's equitable. And then we have to encourage women to not only stay in the field, but to take support, not the supportive roles, but participate and lead, and help them become trailblazers and give back to the field like you are doing, Lisel. So according to, there was two fabulous women in that's writing for World Economic Forum. It's Kayfert Batterfield and Bina Amanand. They say there's 5 ways to increase women working in AI. So supporting STEM education, showcasing female AI trailblazers, mentoring women for leadership roles, and creating equal opportunities. And then the last one that's still a big problem, and that is ensure gender equal reward system. So global organizations are doing a really great job. There's a lot that is being done, and especially in South Africa. But I think it just needs to be bolstered and to really make a tangible difference at scale. That's where I just want to touch on what Women in AI is doing, if everybody will just bear with me for a little while. And that is mainly based on the advice that those 2 women gave. Women in AI is starting to identify and recognize women in AI trailblazers, and Kayfert Butterfield is one of them. So we have a label, Women in AI Trailblazer, and we promote them, and we honor them, and we showcase them. And we have a program to educate women in leadership and progress in the levels of trailblazer. So Women in AI our mission is to close the gender gap, as I said, on all levels, but not to overtake men or to take anything away from the importance of men in this field. So, Lisel, do you have something to add, or can I just give a bit more detail about what Women in AI does?
I know you've got to go, so you're welcome to do that. Then I'll continue with some of the questions and just link it all together.
Awesome. Okay. So what we do is we help companies of all types, sizes, and industries with their diversity and inclusion problem, or yeah, let's say, call it what it is, and as well as responsible AI, from boardroom to C-suite to the strategy tables and the teams and the solutions, as I said. And we're a non-profit do tank, and we bring all minds together across 150 countries. We make change happen with more than 10,000 members, and we really change the role of women in AI with around 200 volunteers that are physically present in about 40 countries with their leadership teams. And it's really a vibrant community on Slack, very vibrant, and we have 32,000 LinkedIn followers. So we have, with our partners, great programs to provide these safe and engaging platforms for women to grow in their careers in AI, both technically and then in terms of leadership and eminence inside the organization and outside the organization. And to me, the beauty of this platform is that these women get the opportunity to learn from and grow and influence like-minded women across the globe. And they foster these lasting relationships with women in so many different countries. So yeah, so we've seen partners also drastically change the recruitment process. Some are having in-depth interviews now with their candidates to uncover skills that are not listed on the profiles. And they also change their the job descriptions that they post to list only 5 skills, no more than that, because they know, and it's only the important skills necessary for the position. And we really want to encourage everybody, you know, on the call and to become involved as either partners or volunteers or members. It's free. So yeah, we just love to have everybody involved.
Do you think we could, Howard, I know you reached out to say if we could collaborate on a training program between,
Yeah.
I don't know if Dr. Natalie responded back to you. I didn't check in with her.
No, I didn't get a response.
Okay, but I think Debbie and I will connect with you and then we see if there's a partnership that we can do, because data and AI is closely linked.
Yeah. Actually,
If there's no
you
data,
heard me. I almost never say AI alone. I always say data analytics and AI. These 3 things, you can't separate it.
Cool.
I would love to.
There I do a biased statement. Dear guys, I always say guys, and then there's women on the call. Apologies. That's my bias that I have to check in on. Is there any questions for Debbie before she steps out? Otherwise, I will continue with you guys.
Yeah, could I ask a question in terms of, I thought you were saying at one stage, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that when you fix it from the top, and I fully agree, we fix it from the top, but I almost felt that you were saying that the resultant data that you get to work with also improves. So it may be the fact that there's observation or understanding of where the biases are, the selection of the training data sets because they're more aware. Can you link to a benefit within the data itself when you start these programs, or is it purely related to people? Is there a correlation?
Yeah, absolutely. And these are the programs that we run. We run it on a people side, the leadership and those things to ensure that there's growth in terms of climbing the corporate ladder. But then the other side of the coin, the one side is economic, financial benefits that you get if you have diverse and inclusion. The other side of the coin is you have a society that benefits from the actual data and solutions that you build that are diverse and inclusive. And we have technical programs to help you identify where your gaps are in terms of the way you look at your data and your solutions for responsible AI, where we bring in the human-centric part of women in AI, the data-centric part where we bring in Andrew Ng's movement and methodology, and his way of thinking is really brilliant around how you look at your data that you train for your AI solutions. The quality of what you do when you test your data is going to determine how inclusive it is. I mean, how good your AI algorithms are.
Right.
So Howard, what I've experienced, even with data literacy programs, because if you start educating right from the C-suite, like board level down, because we tend to only stop at a certain C level. We don't really go up to a board level. But when you start doing those type of trainings and education, they start asking different questions from the data and the reports they read. They
Right.
don't just read it like a graph and stuff like that. They start asking a little bit more depth around it.
Right.
And then the right questions start coming down. Because I always believe that there always is this thing that says, oh, the leadership doesn't know what they're doing. They don't know why they make these decisions. And it's the core problem is because we don't tell them what the detail of the data is truly saying. So when we run these data literacy programs at that top C-suite, they start asking the right questions, and then they can start directing the business correctly. So they can only direct if they have the information. Else they'll do it with blinders on. But that's my personal opinion.
There's the one author that comes to mind is Brent Dykes. Brilliant author talking about data storytelling. So I would consider having him on too, because I mean he also bakes diversity and inclusion into his book. How to tell story with data, but in an inclusive, diverse and inclusive manner.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. So I think there was a few questions and links that I don't think we fully closed off. So I'll try and do it in the last dying 10 minutes, because there was questions also around how do we close the gender gap? And the World Economic Forum released in 2021 the Global Gender Gap Report. It's a very interesting report to read. Some of the reports are very thick, so it takes you like 2 months of bedtime reading. But they've predicted that it will take 135 years to close the gender gap. Ooh. I still struggle to really understand how we're going to do it, but it's the same thing as in South Africa. Our country is in such a dismal state at the moment, whichever, and this is my personal political opinion, which is not for this forum actually, but whoever takes over, it's going to take them at least 40 to 50 years to fix the country. So no one will be successful in the next 40 or 50 years, but we have to start. So the same thing, if it's going to take us 135 years, we have to start now. Otherwise, it will just exponentially be more difficult for us to close the gender gap. And then linking back to what Debbie said, that how to close it is we must first create that understanding and awareness around that there is a gender gap. And if we recognize the problem, then we can solve it, and then we can be part of solving that problem.
Yeah.
So we must invest in policies, and I think South Africa is very pro policies. There's a lot of focus on women in leadership roles, which is great to see, because women have also been, quite an interesting report, been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, because they had to start resigning from their jobs to look after their kids, because they couldn't get caregivers to look after the kids, because COVID will then affect the kid and the caregiver. So there was a lot of impact around the pandemic that we experienced that impacted the women in the workforce. We definitely need more role models and more female role models for women, because diversity is good for business. That is just a fact that we read everywhere. So the more female role models we have and the more mentors we have, we can ensure that there's greater representation, and then we can get all this digital transparency right. Then the snowball effect. So companies with women in leadership roles will hire more women. I hope that is true. Sometimes I do see that some women leadership also only appoints males. So we need to aim for the snowball effect, though, that more women in leadership appoint more women. But it's a very fine line, because we mustn't do it just because of the women. And that's another challenge that women have, and why they step down out of these positions is they feel that they are being seen, that they only got the position because they're women. And women tend to take those type of things quite personally. Then they'll rather resign and leave. So that's also quite a challenge that we have to deal with. We need to design tools for the unbanked women in South Africa especially, because there was a stat, I just need to remember now. So women constitute 60% of the 400 million people in Africa. But only 35 million of them have access to financial services. That's quite a big gap. So if businesses start focusing more on this untapped market, I think there's going to be a lot of potential from a products and services point of view, and from a getting staff to work for you. Paternity leave policies, I think we're doing very well there, especially also for males. So males can also take paternity leave, so the women can perhaps go back earlier to work, and then the male takes over from a certain point of view. I think that's something that we need to consider. And I think we need to understand more of what motivates us as women. We're not as, most of us are not as competitive, but there's different drivers for us in a package that you sell. Work from home, more flexible time. I spoke to a lady the other day that was quite concerned, because she reached out to a line manager to say she wants to know how does she get a promotion. And his words were directive as follows: you are 28. I'm sure you're soon going to want to have your first child. So talk to me after you've had your first child.
Sure.
It was like, excuse me?
Sure.
Yeah, so I don't think he meant it bad, but I do think there's that, let the woman first have her child, and then maybe she can come and get a promotion. Because if she gets a promotion, she's not going to be here for 6 to 8 months, perhaps. So I think that is definitely a challenge, and that's what we need to focus on.
I'm going. Thank you so much. It was such fun. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Debbie. Appreciate it. Do well. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Lisel, can I ask a question on that? I sort of brought up inclusion, but I maybe didn't express it properly enough. But I feel that as men, because we don't know what we don't know, sometimes we make statements like that. And because we don't have the opportunity to talk about it, you get this warm klap after you've done something that you didn't know that you didn't know. And I get the feeling that we don't see how our comments come up. We don't really understand how they are taken, and you know, so it's almost like, in a way, we need to be educated. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a difference. Maybe people feel differently, and I'd love to hear from that. But I think there's all sorts of issues that men have to understand about allowing this diversity to come in, and that there are benefits and elements like that. But I think a lot of times we just don't see it. We don't understand what we're not seeing.
So I think, Howard, it goes also back to, even if you're a female designing a data science model around bias, when we can only mitigate it once you become aware.
Yes.
So if you become aware of it, you need to take a conscious decision around this responsibility for fixing it. Because like myself now, every time I'm in a meeting and I say, guys, some women get offended by it, but I don't mean guys as a gender. It's a type of saying I just grew up with. But I now know some women get offended by it, so I have to check myself constantly. But when I get into the zone, I just, hey guys. But when you become aware, you take responsibility, you fix it. It's the same with the model. When you become aware there's an error, you take responsibility for it, you fix it, you retrain it. So we have to constantly get into that same mindset around it. So because awareness is the biggest thing we need to solve for.
Yeah, and my experience, and especially on ethics, you know, I thought I was ethical, and then you start talking to how things go wrong and then are deemed unethical, and you realize, shucks, I could have got into that. I could have made that mistake. And so you can't always learn by mistake. And I know you're not saying that, but we can't always learn by, oh, shucks, now we are aware of it. Now we've got to. So surely there's a by design. There's a by design responsibility, a by design ethics, a by design, you know.
No, there is. But yeah, it's a difficult one, Howard. I really, because I'm not, and I do apologize for the women on the call, but I'm not a burn the bra type of woman individual. I do see a gap, and I do see the problem, and I want to address it and help it, but I do not want to do it at the expense of someone else. We know what it is like to have been treated like that. It doesn't mean we must now do the same by excluding everyone and just us.
Sure.
So I want us to be consciously aware of that. Yeah, so it's a very difficult thing.
Understand.
Let's see. Is there questions?
Yeah, so there are questions from, there's one from Patrick, but Mark asked the question, is it not a matter of bringing more female, and then the next one, the many letters into the talent pipeline? And so, but I'm assuming that's exactly what you're trying to do.
Yeah. So we go and speak a lot at the universities, but it actually starts a little bit earlier than that. Because if you think of a household, and you have a son and a daughter in the household, and you need to replace a plug, you're going to ask your son to do that, just because that's it. But you should actually there already start saying, actually, the girl can also do it. That the girls start understanding from a young age that there's not a restriction on the type of career you can choose. You can fix a plug, you can fix a TV, you can paint the walls. And that's how my parents brought me up. There was nothing that was, I should do the dishes and my brothers and them should do the mechanics of a car. If I wanted a motorbike, I had a deal, I have to service it myself, I have to take it apart, and I need to put it back together again. That was it, else I didn't get a motorbike. I think it starts from a household point of view. We need to start educating there that any job is good enough for any gender. It's not gender specific. So, and then it goes into the talent pipeline. So we now try and do it I mean, 2 years ago, we started with high schools to start educating there. In the rural areas, it's very hard in South Africa to change that mindset. The household leader, the male, is still very focused on, no, this is a male job, this is a female job. Yeah, so it's very hard for us in the rural areas. In the urban areas, people start getting it, and they're on board with it. And the men are starting to help their daughters with little Raspberry Pis and stuff. And we help with training and school programs like School in the Box and stuff. But yeah, rural, we have a big problem to change that mindset.
Yeah. Patrick, you got a question?
Not really. It's a bit of a comment, really. I want to comment, Lisel, in her approach. It's obvious that now we have a case where someone who's addressing some sort of an injustice has also embodies the concept of equity. Hence, we hear a lot of her saying we should not be fixing one part by reproducing some of the injustices we have seen in other parts. So it's a bit of an appreciation from those who seek to change these spaces, because there are a lot of places where the same model would have to be applied, whether in gender-based, racial aspect, or technical expertise. In any case, that level of awareness is key. In the absence of that, we seem to reproduce another injustice which creates another cycle, and so on and so on. So it's quite good and refreshing to see.
Cool.
Thanks, Patrick. Drew, you got your hand up, sir?
Yeah, I have. So first of all, Lisel, you don't have to say guys, you can say Mikeys. We still take that one.
Mark Nolte will feel left out in Canada.
We'd have to explain it to Mark, yeah.
Okay.
I totally buy into the equality, the gender equality and all the rest. And I think, as most of you will know, I've always supported wherever I can, the promotion and education and growth of women. The question I have, though, is this not a slightly bigger problem in that AI in general is maybe not as sexy, not seen as an appropriate career, and as such is not attracting enough people in any case? But from what I can see, there is a dearth of skill, a shortage of skill over and above there not being a fair parity across the genders and ages.
Yeah, so Drew, in the corporate I'm currently in, my biggest challenge is to that comment Debbie made. I can get women into the careers, but they leave soon thereafter. The biggest challenge is data engineering, AI, machine learning, in most engineering/IT jobs is 24/7. When your code breaks, you have to be on standby and you have to be able to fix it. So most of the women just come back and say, sorry, they can't. They need an 8 to 5 job. So that's another challenge I have to deal with, is now I get the interest, but how do I keep them? Now it's like, okay, how do I automate stuff that a certain central team that sits in India can maybe deal the first response, and only truly if there's an issue, then the person gets called. Because, I mean, even single male dads, I've got 3. It's a problem for them as well to be constantly on standby, because when they have a kid that's sick, they can't be on constant standby. So I don't know. I don't think there's actually a magic answer to it. We must just try our best and see how we mature this journey we're on. Because I think Switzerland and Sweden has got a bigger problem. Because you can identify, it's not gender specific, you can identify with anything you want. It's very prevalent there. So how do you address that in an AI model? If I associate as a flower, what are you going to sell to me? So Drew, I don't know.
Yeah, but I guess at least if we're talking about it, there's a chance of something happening rather than if we turn a blind eye.
Because the learning is understanding.
Yeah, we must try, and then if it doesn't work, try something else. But what I have experienced is Africa is definitely a different animal. So that's what I try enforce with the United Nations and UNESCO and World Economic Forum. They tend to think that all the solutions they come up with in America and Europe is a cookie cutter, and I can just use it and implement it in Africa. It's not the case. I mean, the teams that I have in Algeria versus the teams I have in Ethiopia in Women in AI, I can't apply the same framework. I have to have a different approach, and it's very difficult to sell it to these type of bodies that think there's one framework they can apply across the global world. Yeah, so it will be interesting to see. I'm talking at the UNESCO forum in Namibia the first week in September, so I'll give you some insight after that.
Nice, thank you.
That engagement.
Enjoy it, Esther.
Thanks. Cool. So there was still lots I wanted to talk about, but time has run out.
Sure. Okay, thanks everybody. Is there any final last question? The ABQ, I think. I'm not sure of the acronyms anymore. Any last question for Lisel before we close? First hand up gets it. Avril.
Yes. Hi, Lisel. Yeah, thank you to you and Debbie. This is fascinating. I'm a remuneration specialist by profession, and I've got my own remuneration consultancy business. But I just love stats and numbers and working with it. And I really would like to get into AI and data analytics. And I just want to know, where do I start? And maybe you can give me some advice, and maybe we can start some sort of support group here in South Africa, even if we meet online.
So Avril, I'm happy to engage with you on that. That's one of the programs we as Women in AI also spearhead, is how do we help people transition either from an interest point of view into a new topic, just from wanting to understand it, or to change their careers from what they are in currently into data analytics and AI. So happy to take that offline with you.
Fantastic. Can you just give me, or how can we connect, or can I phone Standard Bank and get your email address?
I'll put all three my email addresses on the chat.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Lisel. That'll be awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now. Lisel, thanks again.